What's going on, guys? Cody from Motorcycle MD. We are back on the KZ 400 and we have some carb tuning to do. We are still not yet in a position to get it on the road to do some testing, but we can do a lot of testing with it on the bench. Now, today's video, we're going to try to be solving for a very common problem, which is throttle lag, or a pretty heavy delay in the throttle when you gag it and it kind of falls on its face. For example, something like this. Now, the problem we're facing on this bike is completely my fault. We are using a bunch of different systems. We have different carburetors. We have some VM30 mechanical slide carburetors. We have some pretty amazing pod filters coming from DNA, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And we have a brand new exhaust, a little bit flowier than what a stock system would have had. So the goal of this video is to use about 2 or 3 different techniques that we can use to apply directly to the carb, make some changes, and see what kind of result we get. So the carburetor settings that I have right now on this bike, just put them together, put them on the bike to see where we're at. We're at 35 idles, 2.0 slides, needle clip position is 3rd from the bottom, so about middle, and the mixture screws are maybe 2 out, maybe 1 3/4, somewhere around there. Huge shout out to the guys over at DNA Air Filter. I've been wanting to use their stuff for a long time. It's a super high quality pod filter. They also make some stuff that fits OEM fitments filters for bikes. It's kind of like K&N, but I think it's better. That's just my opinion, but here's what we went with for the KZ, and I'm super pumped about these. Perfect mouth fitment is, just spot on. All sealed filter. These come pre-oiled. If you are running or thinking about running pod filters on your bike and you do not oil your filters, you are sandblasting your cylinder. And if it starts to smoke, it's 100% your fault. These need to be serviced, and the coolest part was that DNA actually provided with a air filter service kit. The ability to clean and re-oil the filter is vital for the life of the filter. They even offer warranties, like 2-year warranties, I think. Yeah, 2-year warranty. That's awesome. I think they're located in Greece, which is pretty cool. Service kit comes with some new air filter oil from DNA and the air filter cleaner. Directions on it is going to probably soak this on there and let it sit for a little bit and wash it out with water, I'd imagine. And then you're going to oil it. And they give you all of the instructions that you could possibly need to use their stuff. I love it. You have added some serious style to this bike and some functionality and trust with a good air filter, because you get what you pay for with air filters. Trust me. Quality filter, DNA, check them out. So before we start shotgunning parts of these carburetors again to do what we want them to do, we need to understand that there is a difference in what you have, what the most common problem is that I see, and what we're actually going to be dealing with today. Most often what we're going to have in a modern style bike, if it's still carbureted, it's going to be a CV style carburetor. This is just a piston that functions solely off of airflow in, pressure differences of the air, and the throttle input that you give on the back end is what is dictating what's getting forced through these carburetors. These function on their own. This style carburetor is where people run into the biggest issues when they're trying to update or upgrade or modify their stuff. New exhaust, aftermarket, pod filter, something like that. These are the hardest ones to tune. And the reason why these are so difficult to tune for, let's say, this specific problem is because although you are manipulating what is happening on the back end, which is altering the flow or volume or pressure differences that's happening in the front, these are functioning solely off of pressure differences. So there's a little bit of a delay. That's why you do not see CV carbs on high-end race bikes, or for example Honda's R model dirt bikes. Those motors need direct input. They need no delay whatsoever. Like on this Mikuni carb, it's the mechanical slide carb. The input that I give here from the throttle, pulling on the slide in the middle, directly affects what it's doing. There is no delay. It doesn't care what the motor is doing, it only cares what I'm telling it to do. With mechanical slide carburetors, you get a lot more adjustability. One main thing is being able to change the slide and the cutaway that is up front. But with the CV carb on a normal operating bike, you cannot manipulate what this CV looks like. You can drill holes in it at the bottom to make it do different things, but the adjustability kind of drops for this system. Not saying that these are night and day easier, but we have some more adjustability. So what we'll be focusing on in this video is the idle jet, the slide cutaway here, as well as the clip position that is towards the center of the carb. So the information and the fundamentals of what we'll be doing for this carb to make it not do what it's doing now, you can totally apply to your CV system, but just know that you'll be limited. With the Mikuni VM30s that we're running, we have adjustability on these slides, which means that we can change the cutaway, which is this bottom section that we see that should be facing towards your air filter first off. But they offer them in different sizes. For instance, right in the bottom they're labeled. This one is a 3.0 slide, which is a larger cutaway, and we have a 2.5 slide here at the bottom. Now what this is really controlling is the airflow into the carburetor, usually at idle, 1/4 throttle to 1/8, something like that. But the bottom line is the larger the cutaway, the leaner the mix will get. Then what we can do is adjust the needle position that this piston is also functioning. As this slide moves up out of a hole, it is increasing the flow coming out of that main jet. So you can really see the adjustability of leaning out a circuit or the transition from idle into that half throttle, as well as going from half throttle into the wide open throttle range as this tapers down and allows more and more fuel to come out. Alright guys, so I went through an incredible amount of variations of setups on this, and I think that when I came down to start editing all this stuff and put it all together to make it make sense, it became extremely difficult just to know where we were at and what setting was what. So what we're going to do instead, I think, is just to kind of highlight some of the biggest differences that made a change that's like noticeable. We're going to say where we started, which is where we're at right now. And then I'm going to show you guys like when I went to like a dramatic change. And then I'm going to show you where we ended up at, like finalized. Because showing you guys 17 different variations of different setups is a nightmare. So yeah, let's try this. So gagging it, as you can hear, wants to kill it. That's a very, very fast throttle gag. Slow throttle inputs, it sounds amazing. But what we can do is we can turn the mixture screws in about a half turn to see if that doesn't solve it. We're gonna cut the air to it, richen up that mixture screw. I think we need to go fatter on the idle jet. So what we're going to start with are just the idle jets. Right now we got some 20s in there, and we need to see if we can't keep bumping it up so we can just change or manipulate how this thing is accepting all of this throttle all at once. Y'all remember when I set this on fire? Woo! That was fun. Alright, so these are our 20s, our idle. I guess what we're going to do, we're going to write it down. And I have a bunch of 35s. I actually don't have anything in between. So we're going to go to 35. This is a pretty big jump. We're talking, if you want to say that every 5 numbers is one stage, that would be 25, 30, 35, 3 different stages. Or we're going to go 15 numbers up, which is pretty big for an idle jet. But I like to go a little bit dramatic on this stuff because then you can really notice a difference in certain aspects of your throttle. I'm just going to lightly seat these back in with some 35s. And just so I can write it down now, the main jets are at 210. We won't be able to test that main jet until this thing has some brakes on it, but regardless, we know now what it is. Alright, let's see where we're at. So we'll probably need to go out on the air screws. Maybe a full turn or a half turn, something like that. gagging it. And it did not sound bad at all with that super fat idle jet in there, but it became a problem, is ultimately what happened. That tells me that going bigger on the idle jet was a good move, but just not that much. So it's definitely richer. See how it wants to die like that? If you rev it up and let it drop the RPM, does it go below or stay at right at there? If you listen to this, it kind of drops a little bit down below, but it almost feels like it needs to be a little bit richer for that because we don't have an accelerator pump and we're sucking in a bunch of air at the same time. The other thing I want to do is pull these plugs out and see what they look like. And that is a very rich plug. And since now it seems like it is so rich, what I would want to do is change the slides. We have 2.0 slides in there now. I say we go with the 2.5 and see what that does. And for right now, we'll keep the needle height at the same, even though it might be too much, but we don't want to make too many changes all at once. So I think personally it made it worse. Idle was way sporadic. I couldn't really make it smooth itself out. That seems like it's gotten way worse. The one thing that I have noticed that ever since I put the larger idle jet in, we went from a number 20, I think, to a 35. I haven't been able to correct the part that after you give it throttle and it comes back to idle, it still seems to almost want to kill itself and die out. On top of that, I have the mixtures turned around 3 turns out. It's almost like I'm compensating a bunch on the richness of the idle jet with backing the air screw out to 3 turns to see if I can't get it to do what it needs to do, but it still seems to want to fall on its face when we snap back to idle. We haven't solved the quick throttle blip, but I also can't adjust out the fact that it's still rich a little bit at this one part. So what I'm going to do is go back to the 20 idle. We have the 20 idle, the 2.0 slide, and we're just going to try to manipulate the main jet needle now. Alright, so we are back to where I had it. Number 20 idle. I don't have a 25, I kind of wish I did. 2.0 slide. The mixtures are turned out 3 right now. We need to turn these back in for sure. So we'll just go to a good, we'll say 2 turn, or 1.5 out. Going that rich on the idle jet, I think I wasn't able to tune out of it. I kind of thought I was going to be able to, but I can't. So let's see where we're at. Second clip position from the bottom of the needle. 2.0 slides, number 20 idles. So there's some pretty concrete evidence. We drop the idle back to 20. When I give it throttle and it returns back to idle, like after I snap it, it's going right back to where it was. It's not falling on its face again and picking itself back up or wanting to die itself out. But we're back to the substantial fall on its face if you gag it just a little bit. If you're nice and smooth with it, it's fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the main jet needle and I'm going to spike it all the way to the ceiling. We're going to go full rich on the main jet needle. Since when we blip the throttle quick, we're accessing more in that needle. Let's see if raising that needle will richen up where it's gagging itself out at. So until we can ride this thing, I think this is where we're going to lay right now. So doing all this stuff without an exhaust gas analyzer and a color tune, if those even work, I don't even know. We're just trying to manipulate things so it can speak to us. We kept making it, what felt like good at one point got worse and worse and worse. Increasing the slides made it seem very stumbly and erratic. I couldn't get the idle to sound decent with the 2.5s, and then jumping from a 20 idle jet to a 35 idle jet, which is a huge step. I'm probably going to end up ordering some 25s and just call it done right then, because we have the mixture screw set at about 1.5 out. We have a broad spectrum of the mixture screw where I like to keep it between a half turn out and 3 full turns out. After 3 full turns out, the spring doesn't really help it too much and it can actually just fall out on you while you're riding. So because we're at 1.5 turns out, I think we might be able to go to a 25 idle and then adjust it to probably 2 out, something like that, and see if it clears up a little bit more. But right now, I think this is as good as we're gonna be able to get it without test riding it on the road. Huge shout out to DNA Filters for providing them with us on this bike. They look amazing. If you're doing this kind of stuff to your bike, make sure you get a quality pod filter, okay? Do not eBay it, do not Amazon it. I would seriously consider checking out DNA's products. They have a lot of customizable things that you can do with them to change the color of the rubber, and you can make leather tops for them, all different types of stuff. Pretty cool design, and they seem extremely durable, cleanable, reusable, all of the good stuff that you want out of an air filter. Check them out, there'll be a link in the description. And before you go, if you like working on your own bike, in the description there's a free course, 40 plus videos on how to take care of your bike consistently. Working as a factory technician on Honda motorcycles, I tend to see a few things that I want to share with you. I think you'll find it super helpful. As always, Cody from Motorcycle MD, bringing you guys some quality tips and tricks for your next build or your daily rider. See you next time. Later.